the emergency sirens screamed like banshees across the city, echoing off shattered buildings and deserted streets. Above ground, the world had already begun to fall apart, infected bodies roaming the neighborhoods, searching for the living, and smoke from fires blanketing the sky in a red haze. Below ground, in a reinforced concrete structure buried deep beneath an abandoned warehouse, Shelter 9 sealed shut with a loud, metallic hiss. It was supposed to be safe. The 36 people inside believed they had escaped the worst of the outbreak. They were a mix of civilians, ex-military, and a handful of engineers, all selected for their usefulness or sheer luck. Among them was Commander Mason Hale, a grizzled veteran with cold blue eyes and a reputation for getting the job done, no matter the cost. He had overseen the transition into the shelter and had full authority over who got in and who didn't. Shelter 9 had been designed by the government decades ago during the Cold War, forgotten for years, then retrofitted in secret after the first signs of the infection surfaced. It had food, water, air filtration, medical supplies, everything needed to survive. For how long, no one really knew. On day 3 of lockdown, the power flickered. At first, no one paid much attention. Emma Dawes, an electrical technician in her late 20s, chalked it up to the strain of systems coming online all at once. But when the flickers became longer, darker, colder, she knew something was off. "I'll check the generators," she told Commander Hale as the lights dimmed again. "If this place was maintained like the rest of the government's secrets, we're in trouble." He nodded, jaw clenched. "Take backup. No one goes anywhere alone." That was Rule 1. A rule no one dared break after what happened in Shelter 4, the last one to go dark. Emma and her assigned partner, Jonah, a quiet paramedic with an old gunshot wound and nervous eyes, descended to level 3 where the generators hummed in a soundproof room. The second they entered, the scent hit them, metallic, foul, unnatural. The hum of machinery wasn't steady anymore. It growled. Emma stepped closer to the main console. "The core's overheating," she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow. "And someone's been tampering with the cooling vents." Jonah looked around. Tampering? Who would? A thud echoed in the shadows of the room, followed by a low, gurgling hiss. They froze. Emma's hand reached for the flashlight at her belt and swung it around. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the beam landed on something in the corner. A figure. Pale, gaunt, twitching unnaturally. It lunged. Jonah screamed and stumbled back, grabbing Emma as they bolted out the door, slamming it shut just in time. His breath came in ragged gasps. What the hell was that? Emma's hands trembled. That wasn't human. Not anymore. When they returned to the main chamber and reported what they saw, Hale's expression turned grim. "That's not possible," he said. "This place was sterile. No one infected got in. We were scanned. Cleared. Everyone." Emma shook her head. Then explained the thing in the generator room. "It was fast. Wrong. And it looked like someone we locked in with." Whispers started to spread. Rumors. Panic. Could the infection mutate? Could someone have hidden symptoms? Or worse, could the shelter itself be contaminated? Hale acted fast. The generator level was sealed off. Patrols increased. Head counts were taken twice daily. But nothing could stop the growing fear gnawing at everyone's mind. On day 5, someone went missing. Caleb Vaughn, one of the engineers, didn't show up for morning duty. His bunk was empty, his personal belongings untouched. Security footage from the night before showed him wandering toward the air filtration vents, and then nothing. Just static. Emma reviewed the tapes over and over again, searching for clues. He didn't look sick. But he was acting weird. Like he was listening to something we couldn't hear. Jonah, still shaken from their last encounter, leaned in. "You think he's like the one in the generator room?" "No," Emma replied quietly. "I think he might have let something in." The words chilled Jonah to the bone. Whatever Shelter 9 was built to protect them from, it might already be inside. Watching. Waiting. Spreading. The hum of Shelter 9's ventilation system had always been a comforting white noise, a constant reminder of the technology keeping them alive. Now, that same sound filled the hallways like an oppressive presence. It was no longer a sign of safety, but a reminder that they were all trapped in a place where they might not even be alone. Commander Hale called an emergency meeting in the briefing room. The walls, lined with cold metal panels, seemed to close in on everyone as they gathered, each face tense with the heavy knowledge that something was wrong. Something was inside the bunker with them, and it wasn't just the infection. "I need answers," Hale said, his voice low but commanding. "Caleb Vaughn is gone. The generators are malfunctioning. And now, the rumors. We have to stop this before it gets worse." Emma, standing at the back of the room, exchanged a glance with Jonah. They hadn't told Hale everything. They hadn't mentioned the voices. On the second night after Caleb vanished, Emma and Jonah had both heard it, whispers, faint and echoing through the air vents, just beyond reach. At first, Emma thought it was a trick of the mind, the stress of the situation playing tricks on her. But Jonah's eyes, wide and terrified, told her he had heard it too. "Did you hear that?" Jonah had whispered, his voice trembling. Emma had nodded, her pulse quickening. "I thought I was going crazy." "You're not. It's coming from the vents. Like, someone's trying to talk to us. Or, warn us." Neither of them had dared to go back to sleep that night. They sat in silence, listening as the whispers grew louder, clearer. It sounded like a voice from the past, Caleb's voice, faint, but unmistakable. "Help me, before it's too late." But there was no way Caleb could have survived the generator room. No one could. Now, as the meeting continued, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The other survivors were all on edge. They, too, had begun hearing strange things, faint footsteps outside their quarters when no one was supposed to be there, rustling in the walls, shadows flickering just beyond the reach of the dim lighting. "What's going on, Hale?" Kelly, the head of medical, asked, her voice tinged with panic. "You said everything was under control. Now people are disappearing, machines are failing. What the hell is happening in here?" Hale's jaw tightened. "We're not panicking. We're investigating." That's it. Emma couldn't take the tension anymore. She stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention. "Hale, something's wrong. Something's in here with us. I think it's someone who's infected." A murmur ran through the group, but Hale raised his hand to silence them. "We've already established that no one who's infected got in. This shelter was supposed to be secure." Emma met his gaze. "Maybe the infection is evolving. Maybe it's not just the virus anymore. Maybe it's something else, something we haven't seen before." Jonah added, "Or maybe someone let it in." Caleb wasn't the only one who had access to the ventilation system. We all did. And those vents, they're not just for air. The group went silent. Emma could see the fear creeping into their faces, but it was more than just fear, it was doubt. Doubt that the shelter, their supposed sanctuary, was the one place they could still trust. They had no other options. No other safe places. "I'll check the vent system myself," Emma continued, her voice steady. "We can't afford to ignore this any longer. Whoever or whatever is causing this, we need to find it." "Fine," Hale said, his eyes narrowing. "But I'm sending someone with you. I won't risk it." Emma didn't argue. She needed to know what was happening behind the walls of Shelter 9, and she didn't want to do it alone. Jonah volunteered to go with her. Neither of them spoke as they navigated the dark corridors to the maintenance shaft. The shelter was eerily quiet, save for the constant hum of the ventilation system, which now seemed louder, more insistent. The shadows seemed to shift with each step they took, the lights above flickering intermittently. When they reached the access point to the ventilation shaft, Emma paused. She could hear it again, the whispering. This time, it wasn't just Caleb's voice. "Help me. I can hear you. Is that? Jonah whispered, his eyes wide. Emma nodded slowly, the chill in her spine making her shiver. It's coming from the vents. Carefully, she removed the cover, revealing the dark tunnel beyond. The smell of stale air and metal hit her, but it was something else, too, a strange, decaying odor that made her stomach turn. Stay close, she whispered. They crawled into the vents, the metal underfoot groaning with each movement. As they moved deeper into the system, the voices grew louder, and the words became clearer. Please, help me, it's here, it's too late. Emma's breath caught in her throat. They were close now. So close. But what waited ahead was something far worse than either of them could have imagined. The air in the ventilation shaft was thick, heavier with each passing moment. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her flashlight flickering as she and Jonah crawled deeper into the narrow tunnel. The whispers, no longer faint, but clear and chilling, surrounded them, bouncing off the metal walls in a maddening chorus. Please, it's too late, help me. Jonah's voice cracked. It's Caleb. It has to be Caleb. We're going to find him down here. He's still alive. Emma didn't reply. Her thoughts were consumed by the strange voices, growing louder with every footstep. The more they crawled, the more urgent the voices became. A sense of dread washed over her, as though the walls themselves were alive, watching, listening. They reached a junction in the shaft, where multiple vents split off in different directions. Emma's flashlight beam flickered over a small, seemingly insignificant hatch, half hidden behind a rusted vent cover. It wasn't marked on any of the shelter's schematics. In fact, Emma was sure she had never seen this hatch before. This isn't on the plans, she murmured, her voice barely audible against the unsettling sounds in the air. Jonah peered over her shoulder. What are you thinking? Whatever it is, we need to open it, she said, determination hardening her voice. This could be the source of everything. Without waiting for Jonah's response, Emma carefully pried the hatch open. The hinges screeched in protest, but the door gave way, revealing a dark space beyond. A hidden room. It was small, barely enough for the two of them to squeeze inside. The air was stale and musty, the smell of decay mingling with something far worse, fear. As Emma's flashlight swept across the room, she gasped. The walls were lined with equipment, old monitors, wires running from the ceiling, and shelves cluttered with tools and strange vials. But the most unsettling thing wasn't the technology, it was the broken, shattered glass containers scattered across the floor, some still half-filled with strange liquids. There were photographs on the walls, too. Pictures of faces Emma didn't recognize. But one image caught her eye, Caleb, sitting at a desk, his expression hollow, almost lifeless. He was holding something in his hand, something that looked like a syringe. This was a lab, Jonah whispered, his voice barely a breath. A secret one. Emma nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the room. But why hide it here? And why does it feel like we're not supposed to find it? She stepped deeper into the room, her flashlight landing on a large metal door at the far end. The whispers in the vents were nearly deafening now, as though they were coming from this very room, emanating from the walls. The door, like the hatch, wasn't on any of the schematics. It was as if this entire space had been erased from the shelter's official records. This must be the source, Emma said. There's something behind this door. Something they didn't want anyone to find. Jonah looked at the door with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Do you think it's the infection? Or something else? I don't know, Emma replied. But if we don't open it, we'll never know what's going on. What's really happening in this place? She approached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. As her fingers brushed against the cold metal, the whispers seemed to intensify. It was as though the walls themselves were alive, urging her to stop, to leave, to turn back. But she couldn't. With a deep breath, Emma turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room beyond. The air was cooler here, and the smell was sharper, more acrid. Inside, they found a single bed, empty, save for a tattered blanket. At the foot of the bed, a medical cart stood, littered with used syringes and medical supplies. But it wasn't the bed that drew Emma's attention. It was the figure hunched over in the corner, its face hidden in shadow. "Caleb?" Emma called out cautiously. The figure didn't respond. As she stepped closer, the figure stirred, slowly lifting its head. It wasn't Caleb. The thing in the corner was emaciated, its skin stretched tight over its bones, its eyes hollow and black. Its mouth twitched, but it didn't speak. Instead, it let out a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down Emma's spine. Jonah backed away, his breath hitching. What is that?" "It's not human." Emma felt a surge of dread. "It's one of them. But it looks different. More advanced." The creature in the corner began to move, jerking its head toward them with unnerving speed. The growl turned into something far more menacing, something that sounded almost like laughter. But there was no humor in it. Only hunger. Emma grabbed Jonah's arm, pulling him toward the door. "We need to get out of here. Now." As they rushed back through the hatch and into the ventilation shaft, Emma couldn't shake the image of the creature's twisted face from her mind. It wasn't just infected, it was something more, something that had been twisted, mutated by whatever experiments had been conducted in this hidden lab. And now, it was awake. Emma's heart raced as she and Jonah sprinted through the ventilation shafts, the oppressive whispers following them, growing louder, more frantic. She could still hear the growl of the creature from the hidden room, its twisted laugh echoing in her mind. It wasn't just a mutated form of the infection, it was something else entirely. Something that had been locked away for far too long. "Do you think the others know?" Jonah gasped, trying to keep up as they crawled through the tight, claustrophobic tunnel. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear, but there was something else there too, something Emma recognized. He wasn't just scared for his life. He was scared for the others. He didn't want to be the one to say it out loud, but they both knew it. If they didn't act fast, the bunker wouldn't just be overrun by the undead, it would be something worse. Emma didn't answer at first, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. She could hear the panic building in Jonah's voice, but she couldn't afford to fall apart, not yet. "We need to warn them," she said finally, her voice steady. "We need to get to the control room." The control room was at the heart of Shelter 9, surrounded by layers of security and reinforced doors. It was where the bunker's systems were monitored and where decisions were made. The only place that might give them a fighting chance to shut everything down. But getting there wasn't going to be easy. As they neared the junction leading to the main corridor, Emma's mind raced. The bunker was large, too large for them to search every inch, too many places where something could be hiding. And now, with the creature unleashed, they couldn't afford to wait and hope the infection would burn itself out. Whatever was happening in Shelter 9 had to be stopped now. They finally emerged into the hallway. The silence was eerie, but it was a silence filled with anticipation. The door to the control room was just ahead. But as Emma approached, her instincts screamed at her to stop. "Emma, look," Jonah whispered, pointing to the corridor leading away from the control room. At first, Emma saw nothing, just the dim glow of the emergency lights, casting long shadows across the floor. But then she saw it, movement. The unmistakable shuffle of the undead. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath. The quarantine measures had failed. The creatures, whether they were infected or something else, had breached the outer perimeter. But these weren't just any zombies. These creatures moved with unnatural speed, their bodies twisted, their faces blank but eerily calm, like puppets controlled by something far more sinister. And they were heading straight for the control room. Jonah tensed, ready to run, but Emma held him back. "We need a plan." They couldn't just run at this point. The control room had all the shelter's vital systems, including its weapons cache. If they could make it there, they could lock down the building, stop the creatures, and finally uncover the truth behind the hidden lab. But that was easier said than done. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tension creep up her spine. It was just like when she was in the classroom, testing her mettle in a situation that felt impossible. She had done this before, navigating danger, surviving by the skin of her teeth, relying on her instincts. But this time, she wasn't facing a crowded room of zombies. This time, she had something worse, something more dangerous, and more intelligent than she had ever imagined. "Jonah, go check the vents. If you can find another way into the control room, we'll take it," Emma ordered, her voice low and firm. "What about you?" he asked, his eyes narrowing with concern. "I'll deal with the undead. You find that damn vent." Jonah hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "Stay safe." She didn't reply as he disappeared into the darkness, moving with the quiet speed of someone who had learned to survive. Emma stayed hidden, watching as the mutated zombies began to fill the hallway, slowly shuffling forward, blocking the entrance to the control room. Her mind raced. How had they breached the outer walls? What kind of infection could cause this? Then it hit her, this wasn't just a zombie apocalypse. This was something new, something engineered, something far beyond the virus they had originally been dealing with. The whispers, the hidden lab, the creatures, they all pointed to one horrifying truth. The virus had mutated. And this time, it wasn't just turning people into mindless, flesh-eating monsters. It was turning them into something worse, something with purpose. Emma's hand went to her gun, fingers trembling as she prepared to fight. The next few moments were critical. If Jonah couldn't find another way into the control room, they would have no choice but to face these creatures head-on. She just hoped she wasn't too late. Emma's grip tightened around the gun. The mutated zombies had begun to inch closer, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways, dragging their feet with eerie deliberation. They weren't the mindless, slow-moving creatures she had encountered at the shelter's perimeter. These things were different, smarter, faster, more relentless. And they were heading straight for the control room. The air around her seemed to crackle with the tension, a sickening mixture of fear and adrenaline flooding her senses. Each breath she took was shallow, her pulse hammering in her throat. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. She had to hold her ground. For a moment, the hallway was still, silent except for the soft shuffle of their feet. Emma's eyes flickered to the control room door. It was only a few feet away, but she couldn't get to it without facing these creatures head-on. Then, a low growl broke the silence. One of the mutated zombies stopped, its head jerking toward her with a rapid, disorienting movement. Its eyes, black and empty, locked onto hers. A shiver ran down Emma's spine, but she stood her ground, refusing to back down. The creature's lips curled in a grotesque imitation of a smile, and it began to move toward her with terrifying speed. Emma didn't hesitate. She fired, the shot echoing down the hallway. The creature staggered back, but only for a moment. Its skin seemed to ripple, like it was healing faster than she could comprehend. It was more resilient than any zombie she had ever encountered. Another growl. Then, another. Two more creatures flanked the first, moving with an unsettling synchronicity. Emma's heart pounded. She fired again, hitting one of them square in the chest. But the bullet barely slowed it down. She had to think fast. "Jonah," she called into the comms, praying he was still near the vents. "Where the hell are you?" There was no immediate response, only static and the distant sound of rushing air. Emma cursed under her breath. She was running out of time. She couldn't keep these things at bay for long. She was outnumbered, and the creatures were only growing more relentless. She sprinted toward a nearby storage closet, ducking inside just as the first of the creatures rounded the corner. The door slammed shut with a resounding crash, and Emma shoved a shelf in front of it, her breath coming in quick, ragged bursts. She could hear the creatures scratching at the door, their low growls sending chills through her. The control room was her only hope. If she could make it there, maybe, just maybe, she could activate the lockdown protocols. But the hallway was swarming with creatures. She needed a way out. Then, she remembered. The vent. She grabbed the emergency tools from the shelf and pried open a maintenance hatch. The vent was small, but it would get her closer to the control room. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only option she had left. Emma pulled herself into the vent and began to crawl, her hands shaking as she navigated the narrow space. The echoes of the creature's growls reverberated through the metal walls, sending tremors of fear through her. She kept her movements quick and quiet, praying Jonah had found his way into the control room. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The further she crawled, the more suffocating the silence became. She had to keep moving. She had to stay focused. Just as she neared the vent opening that would lead her into the control room, a loud crash erupted from behind her. A zombie had broken through the closet door. Emma froze, her heart racing as she listened to the shrill screech of metal scraping against metal. The creature was close. Without thinking, she pushed herself forward, her hands reaching for the vent cover. With one swift motion, she ripped it off, spilling out into the control room. Jonah was already there, his back to her as he tried frantically to type commands into the control panel. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his movements were erratic. He was running out of time, too. "Jonah!" Emma shouted, rushing over to him. "We need to lock this place down. Now." He turned to her, his face pale with worry. "I'm trying, but the system's been compromised. Someone's tampered with the security feeds. I can't access everything." Emma glanced around the room, her mind racing. "There's got to be a manual override. We can't let these things get any closer." Just then, the door to the control room slammed open. The first mutated zombie stepped into the room, followed by several more. They were faster than Emma had expected, their movements more fluid, like they were hunting. Jonah grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the control panel. "We're not going to make it," he muttered, eyes wide with fear. "We will," Emma snapped, pulling him toward the back of the room. She could see the emergency shutdown lever just across the room. It was their only chance. She motioned to Jonah. "Get the weapons cabinet open. I'll handle the shutdown." Jonah hesitated but nodded, his eyes filled with determination. He dashed to the cabinet, throwing open the doors and pulling out whatever weapons he could find. Emma made her way to the lever, her hands trembling as she reached for it. She had no idea if it would work, but it was their last hope. The zombies were closing in, and the room was growing more crowded by the second. With a deep breath, Emma yanked the lever down. The room shuddered, and the emergency lights flashed a deep red. The sound of locking doors filled the room. The creatures roared in frustration, but they were trapped. For the moment, at least. The emergency lights flickered and buzzed, casting an eerie red glow across the control room. Emma leaned against the cold metal wall, her breath still heavy from the adrenaline, her body trembling with exhaustion. The sound of the mutated zombies pounding against the sealed doors was distant now, but the fear wasn't gone. Not by a long shot. She glanced over at Jonah, who was at the weapons cabinet, trying to load a rifle. His hands shook as he fumbled with the magazine, his brow furrowed in concentration. Emma knew they needed to rest, but they couldn't afford to. Not yet. Not when the creatures were still out there, and the answers they were looking for were within arm's reach. "Jonah," Emma said, her voice breaking the tense silence. "Do you think we're safe now?" Jonah didn't immediately respond. Instead, he finished loading the rifle and looked over at her, his face clouded with doubt. "I don't know. The lockdown is holding, for now, but I don't think this is the end. Whatever this place is, whatever these creatures are, it's only just begun." Emma nodded grimly. She had to agree. The bunker felt like a tomb now, too quiet, too still. It wasn't just the zombies that worried her. It was what had happened here. Why were these creatures so different from the others? Why had they mutated into something so far beyond the standard infection? She was about to speak when the door to the control room suddenly creaked open, causing both of them to tense. Jonah raised the rifle, ready for action, but Emma placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "It's just us in here," she said, a hint of unease in her voice. From the shadows of the doorway emerged Dr. Simon Graves, one of the last survivors from the research team. His white lab coat was torn and stained, his face gaunt and pale. But it wasn't just his physical appearance that unsettled Emma. It was the look in his eyes, the cold, calculating gaze that seemed to pierce through her, like he knew something she didn't. "Dr. Graves?" Emma asked cautiously. "What the hell are you doing here?" Graves stepped forward, not bothering to acknowledge her question. "You've activated the emergency lockdown." "Good. But it's not going to be enough," he said, his voice calm, detached. "You think you've contained the situation, but you've only just uncovered the surface." Emma's instincts flared, a sudden, sharp sense of danger. Something was off about him. She had known Graves for years. He was brilliant, but he was always cold, clinical in his thinking. However, there was something different about him now, something more sinister. "Stop talking in riddles," Jonah growled, tightening his grip on the rifle. "We need answers, Graves. What's going on here? What have you been hiding from us?" Graves met Jonah's eyes, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "Hiding? I've been trying to keep you alive. What do you think this facility was? A safe haven? A last-ditch effort to save humanity? No. Shelter 9 was a breeding ground. A place to study the virus, to create something beyond the ordinary infected. You think you've seen the worst of it? You haven't even scratched the surface." Emma felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice low with disbelief. Dr. Graves' smirk widened, and his eyes gleamed with something darker. "I didn't just study the virus. I manipulated it. I used the samples from the infected to try and create something new, something that could control the infection. A more advanced strain. I've been working on it for years. And now, you've released it." Jonah stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "You're telling me you created these things? The creatures in the hall?" Graves nodded slowly. "Yes. They're mine. But you don't understand. They're not just zombies. They're my experiments. They can think, feel, adapt. They're more than just predators. They're the future of humanity." Emma felt a wave of nausea hit her. "You're insane. This is madness. You've doomed us all." Graves didn't seem fazed by her outburst. He stepped further into the room, his hands clasped behind his back. "Maybe. But maybe not. You see, the real question is whether you'll survive long enough to understand the bigger picture. You've activated the lockdown, yes. But the virus is in the air. It's inside these walls, in every system. You can't shut it down. It's already adapting. It's already learning." Emma's blood ran cold. "You mean we're already infected?" Graves' gaze softened, but only slightly. "We all are, in some way. You think the infection is just a virus? No. It's a new form of evolution. A transformation. You can't escape it. You'll either adapt, or you'll die. It's as simple as that." Jonah's hands trembled, the rifle lowering in his grip. "Why didn't you tell us this sooner? Why bring us here, only to survive?" Graves interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "I didn't bring you here to die. I brought you here to help me finish my work. You're part of this now, whether you like it or not." Emma took a step back, her mind racing. Jonah was right, this man was a liability. He wasn't just a survivor. He was the architect of their nightmare. But she couldn't let him get away with it. "You're lying," she said coldly. "We'll find a way to stop this. We won't help you." Graves' expression hardened, the faintest flicker of anger crossing his face. "You don't have a choice. It's already begun." And then, as if to prove his point, the lights flickered again. But this time, they didn't return to normal. The hum of the ventilation system stuttered, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. Something was wrong. The lights flickered once more, and this time, they didn't return. The emergency lights blinked erratically, casting the room in an eerie, stuttering glow. The hum of the ventilation system stuttered and died. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she stared at Dr. Graves, who stood motionless in the darkness, his face a mask of calm. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice edged with panic. "What's happening?" Graves seemed almost detached, as if the shutdown of the power wasn't a problem he'd anticipated. "The system is failing. It was inevitable. The virus is spreading faster than I predicted. It's a matter of time before the entire facility is compromised. You're not safe here, not anymore." Jonah's hand tightened on the rifle. "Then what the hell do we do now?" "We're trapped, Graves." "Not yet," Graves replied, his tone almost too calm. "There's still a chance. But we don't have much time." Emma felt the tension crackle in the air. The power failure wasn't just a minor glitch, it was part of the larger picture that had been unfolding since the moment they set foot in Shelter 9. The virus had adapted to everything they'd thrown at it, now it was adapting to the bunker itself. "The vents are still active," Graves continued, his voice now cold, calculating. "If we can reach the central access shaft, we might be able to restore some power and get the upper hand. But that's assuming we can survive long enough to get there." Emma exchanged a glance with Jonah. They had no choice but to trust Graves, for now. He seemed to know more about the situation than either of them, and despite her distrust of him, there was no time to question his motives. Jonah was the first to speak, his voice low and tense. "How do we get there?" Graves pointed to the far side of the control room, where a narrow hallway stretched into the shadows. "Down that hall. It leads to the maintenance tunnels. We can get to the access shaft from there." Emma took a steadying breath, trying to push the fear to the back of her mind. The sounds of the creatures outside the sealed doors had quieted, but they hadn't gone away. She had a feeling they were just waiting for the right moment to strike. "Let's move," Emma said, her voice firm, determined. Jonah gave her a quick nod and led the way, the rifle held at the ready. Emma followed closely behind, Graves trailing just behind them, his footsteps eerily quiet for someone so large. The hallway was narrow and dark, the silence oppressive. Emma's eyes constantly darted to every shadow, every corner. She could almost feel the weight of the mutated zombies pressing in from all sides, even though they hadn't reached the control room yet. She wasn't sure if she'd ever feel safe again. As they made their way down the hall, the temperature seemed to drop. A strange chill filled the air, and the lights above them flickered once more, casting strange, long shadows on the walls. The power failure was starting to take its toll. They reached a heavy metal door at the end of the hall, which led to the maintenance tunnels. Jonah tried the handle. "Locked." "Figures," he muttered. Graves stepped forward, pulling something from his coat, a small, black device. It looked like a basic hacking tool, but Emma had no idea how it worked. Graves plugged it into the panel beside the door and pressed a button. The door clicked open with a low mechanical groan. "Let's go," Graves said, stepping inside without waiting for them. Emma hesitated for a moment, looking down at Jonah. His face was grim, eyes scanning their surroundings with every step. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jonah nodded. They entered the maintenance tunnels, the narrow space lit only by a dim emergency light at the far end. The air felt stale, heavy with the metallic scent of the ventilation system and the faint odor of decay. The walls of the tunnels were lined with pipes and cables, some of them exposed, some hidden behind panels that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. The hum of the system had died, and the atmosphere was unsettlingly quiet. No sounds from the creatures. No sounds of the virus spreading. It was as if the world outside had ceased to exist. And yet, Emma felt a sense of dread tightening in her chest, as though something was watching them, lurking in the dark, waiting for the right moment to strike. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Emma felt a sudden shift, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the metal under her feet. The entire structure groaned in protest, as if the weight of the virus and its mutations was too much to bear. "Do you hear that?" Jonah whispered, his voice tense. Before Emma could respond, the walls of the tunnel began to shake again, harder this time. The floor buckled, sending a shower of sparks from exposed wiring above them. Emma stumbled, grabbing onto a nearby pipe for support. "The bunker's failing," she said, her voice rising in urgency. "We need to hurry." They pressed forward, Graves leading the way with surprising speed. The shaking intensified, and a loud, shrill screech echoed from somewhere deeper within the tunnels. Something was coming. Something that had adapted. They reached a large, reinforced steel door at the end of the hallway. It was their last obstacle before the central access shaft. But as they approached, Emma could feel it in her bones. The air was charged with a palpable energy. It felt like the calm before the storm. Graves didn't even hesitate. He pulled out his device again and hacked into the control panel beside the door. The light above flickered a final time before turning green, and the door groaned open. But what waited on the other side wasn't just a dark room. It was the sound of breathing, and the unmistakable shuffle of feet. The mutated zombies were inside the tunnels. And they were closing in. The heavy steel door groaned as it swung open, revealing a scene that sent a chill through Emma's bones. The central access shaft was dimly lit, the shadows stretching ominously in every direction. But it wasn't the darkness that made her freeze, it was the creatures standing just beyond the threshold. There were more of them, dozens. Their twisted forms staggered in the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. The mutated zombies were closer than she'd ever feared, and their slow, relentless shuffle echoed through the tunnels, each step drawing them nearer. Emma's heart raced as the realization hit her. They weren't just creatures, they were intelligent, and they had been waiting for this moment. "Move!" Jonah hissed, pulling Emma back by her arm just as the first of the zombies lurched forward. The rifle in his hands was already raised, but his finger hovered nervously over the trigger. They couldn't waste bullets now. Every shot could draw more attention. Graves was ahead of them, moving with unnerving calmness toward the access shaft's control panel. He was undeterred by the growing presence of the zombies. In fact, his composure unnerved Emma more than anything. Was he truly concerned for their survival, or was he just playing his own game? "Graves, hurry!" Emma snapped, her eyes darting from the growing mass of creatures to the rapidly approaching exit. They had to act fast, every second mattered now. "I'm trying," Graves replied, his voice low but steady. He was fiddling with the panel, his fingers quick and efficient as he bypassed the lockdown codes. "But there's no guarantee the system will work. We're relying on a backup power source. If that fails, it's over." "Then we'll just have to make it work," Jonah growled, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Whatever it takes." The zombies were only yards away now. Emma's mind raced. She could hear the faint clicking sound of their malformed jaws as they snapped in the air, their hunger palpable. These weren't the slow-moving, mindless creatures they had encountered before. These were different. These had a purpose. With a sudden, guttural shriek, one of the zombies lunged toward them. Its limbs were twisted and contorted, its once human form now a grotesque parody of what it had been. The foul stench of decay filled the air as it reached out, its jagged teeth bared. Jonah fired, the shot echoing through the tunnels. The creature's head exploded in a spray of gore, but it didn't fall immediately. Instead, it collapsed forward, its body twitching, still connected to whatever had driven it to hunt. More zombies followed, closing in with alarming speed. Emma grabbed a nearby metal pipe, the weight of it reassuring in her hands. She swung it at the nearest zombie, knocking it off course, but there were too many. Behind her, Graves finally muttered, "Done," his voice laced with relief. The system's rebooting. The control panel lit up, and a low hum reverberated through the walls. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Had it worked? Before she could process the thought, Jonah barked, "We're not out of the woods yet." The zombies were too close now. The sheer number of them was overwhelming. Emma swung the pipe again, catching another zombie in the side of the head, sending it crashing to the ground, but there were more behind it. Their moans and shrieks reverberated off the tunnel walls, growing louder with every passing second. Graves took a step forward, pushing Emma and Jonah aside. "You two get to the access shaft. I'll hold them off." "Are you insane?" Jonah shouted, stepping forward, rifle raised. Just go. Graves ordered, his voice hard. I created this mess. I'm the one who's going to clean it up. The sheer audacity of his words hit Emma like a punch to the stomach. Was Graves really willing to sacrifice himself? Was this his way of redeeming his twisted experiment? Or was he just trying to buy more time for himself? Emma's mind raced, but before she could form a response, Graves turned and faced the oncoming swarm. He didn't hesitate. He picked up a nearby fire extinguisher and swung it at the closest zombie, knocking it back. The other creatures hesitated for a brief moment, seemingly thrown off by the unexpected resistance. Jonah's face twisted in anger. We're not leaving you. Emma grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. We don't have a choice. He's buying us time. We have to get to the shaft, or we're all dead. With a final, reluctant glance at Graves, they pushed forward, racing down the narrow tunnel toward the access shaft. The walls closed in around them, and the air grew colder with every step. They reached the entrance to the shaft. It was a massive vertical tube, stretching up into the darkness above them. The control panel beside the entrance lit up, and a soft whirring noise began, followed by the faint sound of machinery coming back online. We're almost there, Emma said, her voice barely a whisper. She had no idea if the shaft would actually lead them to safety, but it was their last hope. Jonah looked at her, his eyes wide with fear. What if it's a trap? What if there's no way out? We'll find out soon enough, Emma replied, determination in her voice. She turned toward the entrance to the shaft, but before she could step inside, there was a violent explosion that rattled the walls around them. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the lights flickered wildly. The explosion had come from deep within the facility. Graves had triggered it. He had detonated something to ensure the zombies couldn't follow them. Emma could only pray that it had worked, and that they weren't just sealing their doom. As the walls continued to shake, Emma and Jonah stepped into the shaft, the door sealing behind them. The hum of the machinery grew louder, and for a moment, the sounds of the zombies faded away. They were trapped in the unknown now, but they had made it this far. And that, for now, had to be enough. The end, or is it?